Welcome to MSUA's Game Changers Live, where we speak with satellite and mobile connectivity thought leaders about industry trends, new technologies, and share what you need to know about where satellite technology is headed in the future. I'm your host, Lisa Dreer. I'm really excited to introduce our guest for today, Roger McGarrahan. He is the CEO of Pathfinder Digital. Welcome to the show, Roger.
Thanks, Lisa. Great to be here.
Yeah, maybe we can start by just having you give us a little bit of background on yourself and Pathfinder Digital.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I came into the satellite market through a little different path, probably than most people. I was a in-house counsel for a company called ComSat RSI, where we did a really unique variety of antenna systems. We did radio telescopes and early warning systems for missile defense and Mode S antenna and TACAN antenna systems for aviation, and of course, a lot of satellite communication antennas. So while I was working as in-house counsel, I started to learn the business a little bit and develop an interest and fondness for it. Um, I ended up working for Thales, which is a big defense contractor from France, and I worked in their group doing instrument landing systems, and then ultimately doing high power terrestrial television transmitters and digital video streaming products. And while I was there, I got working more on the operations side through a number of projects my CEO asked me to take on. Ultimately ended up running operations, and then when our CEO left, I ended up taking over and managing the company for him for a number of years. And that's when we started Pathfinder, which was in 2007. And so it's been kind of an interesting road to go from attorney with a psychology major into satellite communications. Not exactly common, but as I've heard from other people I've spoken with, not that uncommon either.
Wow, amazing. So maybe tell us a little bit more about Pathfinder Digital.
Yeah, sure. So Pathfinder um, is a company that really focuses on mobile ground terminals. So MVSATs, particularly for mobile ground applications. And we have a bit of a unique business model. What we do is stay agnostic to all the antenna manufacturers. So we don't make antennas per se. What we really do is look at the requirements of a particular program, mostly military programs, and really study their ConOps and try to understand exactly how they intend to use the MVSAT system, under what circumstances, and of course under what networks and technical parameters they might be operating under. And then what we do kind of is act like the technical program manager, where we go out to the industry and we select what we think is the best antenna for the application and pair that with the best RF and baseband equipment that you need with it. So that's kind of your standard integration model. But we do is go way beyond that. We also tailor the antenna to really fit the particular ConOps, and so that can mean all kinds of things. Um, it can often be technical enhancements to the materials or the hardware. It can be looking at the mil spec requirements of the terminal of the program and trying to make the terminal fit those mil spec requirements. 810 for ruggedness, or whether it's EMI or EMC considerations. Whatever drop tests they have, anything like that. So we adapt it to those the kind of the COTS terminal to those applications. It can often be very practical considerations, like what size portals you're going to put it through. So it needs to have certain weight and dimension limitations for its pack out. It can be issues of what military vehicles it's going to be mounted on. So, what power restrictions do you have? Are there restrictions on access to the hardware for the warfighter? So do we need to develop GUIs to make it more accessible remotely? Really, anything like that, all the way down to the specific documentation that the program needs. We develop all that, tailor it, and then create what we think is the optimal solution for the ConOps, and then sell that into the program and maintain it.
Wow, amazing. So are there certain trends that you're watching or that you're seeing come through in terms of requests for different use cases?
Yeah, so the big trend, there's been a couple big trends we've been watching over the last 8 years, and just kind of take them in order. On the move was a requirement that the military and government in general has been requesting for quite some time. Frankly, what the market's been able to offer in on-the-move solutions has, until I think pretty recently, been a bit disappointing. Um, they've done a good job for aeronautical applications, and people have very good solutions for maritime. But in terms of ground-based communications, I think they'd been a bit lacking, not very operationally efficient, using too much spectrum, so kind of expensive to operate when they did operate, and they really weren't getting the throughput that they needed. But we're seeing some evolutions with antennas now that I think are stand a real good chance of meeting that on the move requirement. Of course, the government for some time has been asking for um, like radio defined modems, essentially software modems that allow you to change the waveforms dynamically. So they're starting to make some inroads into those areas. Um, so yeah, we're starting to get some development, but I think it's really the most recent ESA solutions that are creating the most interesting possibilities for further growth, as well as the government's uh, tendency to now look to commercial satellite to operate off of for space segment and not rely as much on their government-owned assets.
Yeah, wow, exciting. Do you see the launch of some of the, mega Leo constellations having an impact yet, as
Yeah,
well?
yeah, absolutely. So, clearly the Leo constellations, assuming they're successful, they're going to provide, one main benefit is they're going to provide connectivity in places where the geos, struggle, basically being the polar regions, right? So, going to be very nice having that connectivity in areas that we presently don't cover that well. But also just the proliferation of the LEO terminals and those architectures are going to do a couple things. One, they're going to extend the area where we have data connectivity. They're also going to provide, geographically, I mean, they're also going to provide a nice network in the sky to transfer data faster, which is going to be, highly beneficial for certain market applications. And then hopefully they lower the cost
Yeah.
by being a network, those networks fully launched. Hopefully we see overall connectivity go down in terms of operational cost. And hopefully we see terminals go down in price just simply due to the volume of people that are buying them. So I think they'll be very impactful. The big question is, which I don't think we've completely answered yet, is just how efficient are they going to be? Will they meet all of our expectations, or I'm sure there are complications. I'm not really a network guy or ground systems operator from spectrum management perspective, so I don't really know. But I can imagine it's quite a complicated venture they're pursuing.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, what do you feel are some of the most important, roles that the satellite industry has to play in the future of mobile connectivity?
Yeah, so just generically speaking, this is going to probably sound a bit overly bland, but just that global transmission of data. I mean, more data to and from more places and faster, to me is going to be the core evolution. Again, the polar regions, connectivity in the polar regions through NGOs, and just generally keeping up with the ever increasing communications demand of the military. I mean, I think back in the early days when I got my first PC and how big my hard drive was and my internet speed, and then find out I could get a 500 uh, uh, megabit hard drive, and wow, I'll never fill that up. And now we're filling up terabits daily. So it just keeps getting faster and faster and larger and larger. So yeah, I think the satellite industry is going to play a major role in keeping up with that demand.
Yeah, what do you see as some of the biggest changes that we'll see over the next, I don't know, 2, 3, 5 years?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk from a ground terminal guy's perspective, and from what I see and what we really focus on. Um, Digital IF, I think, is something that's new and interesting, and I will caveat my comments to say I don't yet understand digital IF, so I'm kind of trying to piece it all together from what I'm reading. But the way I understand it, it's essentially kind of replacing that L band transmission from the antenna to the modem with digital. And that seems like that's going to offer some pretty interesting benefits. One, not having to worry so much about your cable run length, and two, providing access to terminals more remotely, which gives you some interesting networking capabilities, and even the potential to avoid bad weather or outages in certain places by remoting to other terminals. So I think that'll be something to watch. And keep an eye on and see what applications we're going to see. Um, Also, the use of hybrid architectures, blending cellular communications with satellite, with cellular as the primary use scenario and satellite as the backup. We're seeing a number of companies do that, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And we'll see that probably become a bit of a standard, especially in the first responder sector. Maybe not so much in the military side, but certainly for first responders. But we'll see. Um, and then and commercial applications as well. Um, and then, as I mentioned earlier, the ESAs that are coming out. So, we've been watching on the move terminals and ESAs, and their potential to provide connectivity. Not only to these NGO satellites, LEO and MEO architectures, but also connecting on the move, which you just can't do with the traditional parabolic systems. And we, for many years, were a bit, I guess, dubious as to how effective they were going to be and operationally efficient. But now we're starting to become believers. We're seeing ESAs that are operating at impressive data speeds with a reasonable power consumption, and at really good data speeds. I mean, just doing what they were represented to do maybe 8 years ago. So that promise seems to be coming true. So we're watching it very closely.
That is really exciting news.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's something that the industry's kind of been waiting for a long time, and
yeah,
there's been a
yeah,
lot of kind of roadblocks to getting there, not only from
yeah.
the ground system perspective, but also from the constellation perspective.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and that's actually I'm glad you mentioned the constellation, because that was one of the biggest problems. So part of our business model is we are constantly evaluating industry product, industry antennas, because it's our job when a potential program comes out to know who offers what. So we're always looking at the antenna manufacturers and trying to understand what it is they can actually offer. And some of the problems with the ESAs that we've evaluated over the years, and we've evaluated many, is that the networks needed to be really tailored for them to operate, which it kind of explains some of the confusion, right? Because you get press releases or representations being made, hey, we have these data speeds and under these conditions, and they're probably true, but we found that sometimes they were true when the networks have been optimized for their particular application, which is great, but not real practical all the time, because you're not always going to be able to be on the network that is optimized for your particular hardware. But again, what we're seeing now are ESAs that are made available that we can pop on a network, the same way we would a parabolic, make absolutely no changes to the network, and get maybe not comparable data speeds to a parabolic, but pretty good, certainly acceptable data speeds.
Wow. So I think you're kind of getting into suggesting what sort of criteria the user community should be looking at as they implement some of these mobile satellite solutions for their use cases. What, what are some of the criteria that you would really suggest that they look at?
Yeah, so we get quite a few calls from people um, who kind of ask that question. What is it that I need? And for us, there's two elements to it. One is really understanding what your use case is, and understanding it from the standpoint of a satellite communications operators, because sometimes the customers themselves don't fully recognize that there are requirements of their use or limitations of their use, which are going to significantly impact what they should be even looking to get, and how they would operate it. So really understanding their use, but then also understanding the capabilities and limitations of the networks and the hardware is really critical. You really need to match the user's needs to what the market offers, and that's not always easy to do. It's pretty complex, and it's usually a balancing effort. There's always trade-offs, right? You're always trading between well, there's 1,000 of them, but it's things like, do you want it rugged? Do you want it light? Do you want it inexpensive? What networks are you going to be on? How you want a geo architecture? There's just so many use scenarios. Is it on the move? Is it not? And then even trade-offs within the bands and such. It's complicated, and you really need a subject matter expert that understands it, so they can help walk the user through their use case and then help them identify the hardware and the network that's optimal for that use case. And so, it's a partnership when we talk with our customers to try to get them the optimal solution at the lowest possible price point.
Sure. I think one of the things that I've heard recently from the user community is that they may be using a current provider, and they're they're comfortable with that provider, but maybe not getting everything that they need. So for example, one user was talking about the need to do training while their people are in the field, but
Hmm.
not having kind of the bandwidth or the support to be able to do that because of
Yeah,
where
yeah.
they operate. And so, like, at what point do they need to start thinking about, boy, it's worth it for us to start looking to change how we're doing this or who our provider is?
Yeah, I mean, it's like that old expression, when's the best time to plant an oak tree? 10 years ago, what's the second best time is now, right? So it's kind of the same thing there where, really, the best time would have been upfront before you got the service. But if they find themselves to be, a bit behind the eight ball, now is the time to start looking at what your options are. Um, and I think some of the operators, especially in the first responder market, are very cognizant of that, a situation like that where the people need to use their space segment, very actively. People need to be trained, equipment needs to be tested. And so on the first responder side, I think most of the companies offer a type of service that provides their users an opportunity, so they can jump on and use uh, the network, monthly, without incurring any additional operational costs, as long as they keep it, to a reasonable level for a couple of days, to keep the operators practiced at what they're doing and make sure that the equipment all checks out. And if my advice to somebody in that situation where they need to do that is just go back to your service provider, tell them what you need. They're probably going to be happy to help you stay better trained and more familiar with operations on the network, because that means less support for them later. I mean, operators, we all want really well-trained, comfortable users, because we get far less support calls if they're comfortable with what they're trying to attempt to do.
Sure, sure. Are there any pieces of advice that you would have for folks that are kind of looking to do a review, aside from, I mean, obviously working with the provider that you're already working with to see if there are things that they can do? Is there kind of a process or an approach that they should take as they're maybe considering other solutions?
Yeah, I would talk to somebody who's a bit agnostic, because we all have businesses, and we all have an objective to sell our product, which means what you might get from any individual you talk to, or any individual organization, is the best they can offer you. Um, or what you might need to hear is, what else is out there and what do I really need? So rather than putting yourself in a position where you're just trying to select from a few available solutions, maybe talk to somebody who can kind of parse through that a little bit with your best interest in mind, and reach out to somebody that has what might be your optimal solution that you wouldn't otherwise consider. Again, the
Great.
subject matter experts, which is not
Sure.
us, by the way. So that's not a plug, because that's not what we do. But there are plenty of experts out there.
Absolutely. What might be a great way to identify those? those experts?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, MSUA, I'll give you guys a plug. I mean, you got a collection of people who, who are in that core business of providing services and connectivity to mobile operators. So, I'd say call Lisa and, and
Excellent.
see who she knows who's out there. Yeah. Yeah. Um,
Great.
yeah, I mean, make contacts, right? I mean, that's the great things about like the satellite show is it's a room full of people who have expertise in those areas. So just start talking to people, and it's a small industry. We tend to know a lot of each other, and there are people you can find that know where to go. Give me a call, and I'll send you the people I know.
Great, great, great. Well, Roger, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your
My pleasure.
insights. I really appreciate it. I also want to take a moment to thank the Mobile Satellite Users Association for hosting these sessions. If you want to learn more about additional Game Changers Live episodes and our weekly newsletter, please visit msua.org. And we'll see you next time on MSUA's Game Changers Live.